Joining me now from Boca Raton, Florida, former Chief of Staff of the Congressional Electromagnetic Pulse Commission and current Executive Director of the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, Peter Pry, Ph.D. Peter, China expert Gordon Chang is looking for some kind of Reagan moment right now with what's going on with Hong Kong vis-a-vis China. And this Reagan moment that Gordon Chang is looking for is something tantamount to Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall, only in this case it would be President Xi tear down your imperialist policy. You think that that is needed right now?
Yes, I think this is a pregnant moment for President Trump and the administration to lay down a line in the sand on the human rights for Hong Kong, which China is violating the fundamental agreement in which Hong Kong came back to them in 10 years. And many people are interpreting this as a sign of weakness. I see it as a sign of Chinese hyper-aggression, where they're reaching out and in violation of international law, not only taking over the South China Sea, but now flagrantly violating the agreements on Hong Kong's autonomy. If we just stand back and do nothing, it's going to be, I think, very similar to the 1930s when Nazi Germany, in the face of appeasement from the West, got more and more aggressive. It will not end here.
Not just South China Sea, but China's on the move. Panama Canal. It controls the Panama Canal now. What would Jimmy Carter say to that? Even Jimmy Carter. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but they're also going into third world countries, making these deals, these loans, securing them against ports. And then when those countries default, guess what? They get that port and they can turn it into a military base. So we know what they're doing. But you wrote a piece about the nuclear threat. This is a nuclear threat both based in its arsenal itself, China's, but also its philosophy. Let's go to the arsenal first. In your piece, you say effectively that it's fantasy that China has 300 nuclear warheads. It's many more than that.
Yes, that's right. Western analysts have consistently grossly underestimated the number of nuclear weapons and the sophistication of the Chinese nuclear arsenal, I think because for decades we haven't wanted to believe that China would be anything other than a strategic partner, and that if they were building a large strategic arsenal comparable to ours that could challenge the United States, well, it would imply that they were interested in challenging the United States eventually. And I think that this wishful thinking has led Western analysts to turn a blind eye to China. In my article, I talk about an estimate that was done by General Yeltsin, who is the former commander of the Russian Strategic Rocket Forces, done 11 years ago, back in 2011. And Yeltsin, I think, has a much more realistic assessment, where he points out, for example, if you just look at the amount of uranium and plutonium that China has been able to produce in its nuclear facilities, it's enough for 10,000 nuclear munitions. Now, Yeltsin ends up with a more conservative estimate than 10,000 because he counts the number of missiles and bomber platforms they have for nuclear delivery and arrives at the conclusion that China probably has at least 1,800 tactical and strategic nuclear weapons. Not 300, but 1,800.
All right, so let's stipulate that, 1,800, Peter. Let's go from there. Stipulate 1,800 nuclear warheads. Here would be the breakdown then of the three superpowers. Russia with 3,500 approximately, China 1,800, and look at the United States, 1,700 and shrinking. But let's dovetail this into the philosophy that you touched on, where China effectively has put out there some disinformation that it would never use nuclear weapons as a first use, a first strike. If you look at the details of what China has in its infrastructure, for example, no advanced warning of an incoming nuclear strike, you come to the conclusion that that's not accurate, that their philosophy really is use them or lose them.
Well, that's right. They have an alternative because they don't have a ballistic missile early warning radar system like the United States. They don't have satellite systems that would provide them with early warning like the United States has, so that they could launch their forces on tactical warning. If they really had a no first use posture, it would basically be suicide, and it would render useless their nuclear deterrent because it would be vulnerable to a surprise attack by Russia or the United States or even by India. And we wouldn't even have to use, in the case of the United States and Russia, we wouldn't even have to use nuclear weapons to disarm them if they really had a no first use policy. We could use our conventional forces, as could the Russians. So it just doesn't make any sense from the point of view of our strategic posture.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.